In a world that never stops talking, where everyone's shouting to be heard, posting to be seen, and performing to be validated, there's one force that cuts through the noise more powerfully than anything else. Silence. Not the kind of silence that shrinks or hides, but the kind of silence that commands the room without saying a word. You've seen it before. That person who walks in and doesn't need to announce themselves. They don't overshare. They don't try to dominate the conversation. They don't chase attention. And yet, somehow, everyone pays attention to them. Why? Because their presence speaks louder than their voice. This is what the Stoics taught. That true authority isn't found in volume. It's found in stillness. That the calmest person in the room is often the most powerful one. Marcus Aurelius didn't lead Rome with outbursts. He led with clarity, with emotional control, with presence. And that presence, according to the Stoics, comes from three things: calm, groundedness, emotional resilience. Let's break that down. Calm is not weakness, it's control. When you're calm, it means you're not letting the external world dictate your internal state. You're not reacting to every comment, crisis, or opinion. You're observing, choosing, responding with intention. That kind of restraint, it makes people lean in. It makes them wonder what you know that they don't. Because in a loud room, the one who listens carefully holds the real advantage. Being grounded means you know who you are, so you don't have to prove it. You're not swayed by trends. You don't fold when challenged. You don't need to over-explain or defend your choices. There's a deep power in knowing your own values, in being centered enough that outside noise can't knock you off course. And the only way to get there is by building a relationship with silence. Not the kind that makes you feel lonely, but the kind that helps you hear your own voice again. And finally, emotional resilience, the quiet superpower. The Stoics never said, "Don't feel." They said, "Feel fully, but don't be ruled by feelings." You can be angry and still choose grace. You can be hurt and still choose peace. You can be uncertain and still take action. When people see that you're not easily shaken, they trust you. They listen to you. They respect you, because you become the person they look to in chaos. The calm in the storm, the grounded presence in a world that never pauses. So let me ask you this. When you walk into a room, do you bring energy that feels centered or scattered? Do people feel more grounded when they're around you, or more reactive? Do you speak to impress, or stay silent and let your presence carry weight? Because the truth is, in a loud world, silence is the ultimate power play. Not passive, not weak, but wise. It's a choice to hold back when others rush in. It's a decision to lead from within, not from ego. And it's a sign that you've mastered something most never will: yourself. The goal isn't to be the loudest person in the room. The goal is to be the most anchored. So, as we move forward in this video, I want to invite you to do something rare. Don't just listen to this message, feel it. Let it slow you down, let it sink in, and ask yourself, what would it look like if you didn't need to prove anything anymore? Because that's where real strength begins, not in performance, but in presence. Part 1. Inner mastery creates outer authority. Let's be honest. In most rooms, people try to take respect. They try to force it with loud opinions, big personalities, or constant self-promotion. But real respect, the kind that doesn't need to be chased or demanded, that kind of respect is earned without saying a word. And it starts with something most people never think to focus on: your internal state. Before you can command a room, Before anyone sees you as a leader, a force, a presence, you have to master yourself, your emotions, your breath, your posture, your energy, because no one follows someone who's constantly rattled by life. No one is drawn to someone who needs validation to feel valuable. Marcus Aurelius said it best. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Think about that. You don't control how people see you. You don't control the outcome of the conversation. You don't even control the energy in the room until you control your own. And once you do, everything changes. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine two people walk into a tense meeting. One walks in fast, loud, anxious. You can see it in their eyes. Their energy is bouncing off the walls. They're trying hard to seem important, and you can feel it. The other walks in slow, calm, collected. They're not saying much, but something about them settles the space. They're breathing deeper. Their shoulders are down. Their eyes are steady. Their posture isn't stiff, but anchored. Who gets more attention? Who seems more trustworthy? Who naturally shifts the tone of the room? It's not the loud one. It's the one who's mastered the inside. That's what the Stoics trained for. They didn't practice detachment to feel nothing. They practiced control to remain steady in anything. And that control isn't just about avoiding breakdowns. It's about radiating strength, quietly. It's about becoming the kind of person whose presence calms tension and commands trust. So how do you get there? Let me share 3 core habits of inner mastery. Number 1, control your breath. Your breath is your anchor. When you're nervous, it speeds up. When you're angry, it tightens. When you're confident, it stays calm. So the next time you enter a room, or even just a difficult conversation, pause. Breathe low and slow. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. This one habit trains your nervous system to follow you, not the chaos. Then ground your posture. You don't need to puff up or shrink down. Just stand like someone who's not in a hurry to prove anything. Feet planted, chin level, shoulders relaxed. No crossed arms, no fidgeting, no forced smile. Your posture speaks volumes, and when it says, "I'm at peace with myself," people listen, even without words. 3. Observe before you react. This is where most people lose control. They get triggered. They try to dominate or defend. But the one who observes first, who listens without flinching, always has the upper hand. Let others show their emotions. Let them race to be heard. You sit back, study, breathe. Because the calmest one in the room, that's the one who holds the real power. Inner mastery isn't about being cold or robotic. It's about being centered. It's about training your nervous system to obey your values, not your moods. It's about carrying peace into places where everyone else brings noise. It's about earning respect, not through performance, but through presence. So if you want to command respect without speaking, don't just memorize what to say. Train how to be. Because when you master your inner world, your outer world begins to respond to you differently, not because you forced it, but because you became the kind of person who doesn't need to. Part 2. Strategic silence is a weapon. We've been conditioned to believe that influence comes from what we say. That the louder you are, the more you lead. That to win attention, you need to jump in fast, talk more, speak first. But the truth is, the most powerful person in the room is often the quietest. Not because they don't have something to say, but because they understand the power of strategic silence. Let me show you what I mean. There's a corporate executive I once met. Respected, calm, always in control. In meetings filled with ambitious voices and eager opinions, he'd often stay completely silent, not out of fear. Out of discipline, he'd listen, observe. Let others expose their thinking. And when he did speak, he didn't have to raise his voice. His words cut through the room like a blade, because they weren't rushed. They were measured. And slowly, people began to notice something. He didn't compete for authority. He commanded it through silence. You see, silence in tense moments isn't passive. It's psychological pressure. When everyone expects a reaction, and you give them stillness, they lean in, they wonder, they reflect. That's control. In Stoic terms, it's the ability to remain unmoved while others lose their center. Elizabeth Kenny once said, "He who angers you conquers you." And it's true. The moment you snap, blurt, or overreact, you've handed over the power. Not just over the conversation, but over yourself. So how do you use silence as a weapon, not to hurt, but to lead? Let me give you 3 practical forms of control that shift the dynamic of any room. Number 1, control of your voice. You don't have to talk less. You have to talk smarter. Speak slowly, deliberately. Pause between sentences. Let silence do the heavy lifting. In tense discussions, the one who slows the pace controls the tempo. It signals composure, and it subtly challenges others to meet you at your level. And 2, control of your breath. When tension rises, most people breathe shallow and fast. Their energy speeds up, and it shows. But if you breathe deeply, slowly, and stay relaxed, you tell the room, "I'm not moved by this," and that presence is magnetic. Before you respond, take 1 breath, not to delay, but to disarm. Number 3, control of your facial expression. This is one of the most underrated forms of communication. A calm face in chaos is a message all its own. No smirking, no grimacing, no showing your hand too early, just a steady gaze, a relaxed jaw. Stoic, observant, unapologetically composed. You don't need to look angry to be taken seriously. You just need to show that your state is not for sale. Now, here's something to remember. Strategic silence isn't about withholding your voice. It's about using it with precision. It's about creating contrast between the noise and the signal. Because when people learn that you speak only when it matters, they listen when you do. They stop interrupting. They stop guessing. They wait. Because they know what's coming carries weight. That's how you go from being another voice in the room to becoming the one they watch, even when you say nothing. So next time you're in a heated moment or tempted to prove your worth with words, pause. Let silence speak first. Not because you're afraid to speak, but because you've learned the power of waiting. Because in a world full of noise, silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And those who master it, they don't just win the conversation, they win respect. Part 3. Observe more than you react. Let me ask you something. When you walk into a room, are you watching or reacting? Most people do the latter. They're scanning for validation, trying to be seen, liked, acknowledged. They speak fast, move quick, and get caught in every emotional ripple. But the Stoic does something different. He doesn't rush to respond. He studies. Before he opens his mouth, he reads the energy. He watches who controls the flow, who's bluffing, who's pretending. He learns everything without saying a word. Because here's the secret. Real power doesn't need to prove. It observes. It understands. And it holds its fire until the moment counts. There's a powerful quote by Machiavelli that says, "To command, you must understand." To understand, you must watch, and to watch, you must be silent. Let that sink in. Leadership isn't about being loud. It's about being aware, being present without being predictable. Unpredictability is power. Why? Because the person who doesn't react emotionally, who doesn't rush to defend or over-explain, becomes impossible to manipulate. They're calm. They're quiet. They're watching everything, and you can't tell what they're thinking. That unnerves people. It shifts the balance of control. Suddenly, the one who talks less holds more influence. Now, I'm not saying you should become cold or distant, but I am saying, observe more than you react. Let others reveal themselves. In fact, they can't help it. The louder they get, the more they expose their ego. The more they try to impress, the more you see their insecurity. And when you're silent, you're not disconnected. You're dialed in. You're collecting information, reading intentions, sensing patterns. And then, when the time comes to speak, you do so with precision, not noise. This is especially true in moments of provocation. Let's say someone tries to bait you, publicly challenge you, insult you, test your frame. Most people feel pressure to clap back immediately. They react. They bleed power. But the Stoic knows not every attack deserves a response. Some deserve a look, a pause, and silence that says, "You don't even register as a threat." That's not weakness. That's dominance under control. I've seen this in boardrooms, classrooms, even everyday conversations. The man who can sit in silence while others squirm. The man who listens without flinching, who watches without reacting. He becomes the person everyone subconsciously defers to. Because control isn't about volume, it's about presence. And presence begins with stillness, inside and out. So how can you build this trait in yourself? Here are 3 practices I use every day. And number 1, pause before reacting. Train yourself to insert a pause between stimulus and response. Someone challenges you. Pause. Your emotions flare up, pause. That moment of space gives your rational mind time to lead. Number 2, watch without judgment. Don't observe to criticize. Observe to understand. Ask, why is this person acting this way? What are they not saying? That's how you gather insight, not just information. Number 3, become comfortable being silent. Most people fill silence with nervous chatter. Don't. Sit in it. Let others break it first. Silence draws attention. It makes your presence felt without effort. At the end of the day, you are not here to be predictable. You are here to become unshakable. And that begins by watching more and reacting less. Because the man who sees everything but says little holds the real power in the room. And when he speaks, everyone listens. Part 4. Presence is non-verbal power. In a world obsessed with appearance, flashy clothes, loud voices, constant talking, true presence doesn't shout. It doesn't chase attention, it commands it without a single word. Let me tell you something most people overlook. Presence is not about how you look. It's about how you carry yourself. It's non-verbal, it's invisible, but it's undeniable. A Stoic's power isn't worn, it's felt. It's the energy and how they enter a room. The way they move, deliberate. The way they breathe, measured. The way they pause before ever speaking. And that calm, that stillness, makes everyone else lean in. There's a saying among the Stoics, be still while others perform, because most people, they're performing all the time. performing confidence, performing intelligence, performing value. But the Stoic knows, when your inner world is grounded, you don't need to perform. You don't need to impress. You already possess the authority others are trying to fake. Let me give you an example. I once watched two men walk into a business meeting. One was loud, animated, cracking jokes, shaking hands with everyone. The other, calm, quiet. He sat down, said little, but when he did speak, the whole room fell silent. Guess who walked out with the deal? The one who didn't need to prove anything. See, real presence isn't about talking more. It's about talking less, but saying more when you do. It's in your posture, your eye contact, your ability to hold silence without flinching. Even your breath matters. The person who breathes slow under pressure, moves slowly when others panic, automatically becomes the most trusted voice in the room. Not because they said more, but because they were the anchor in the storm. So how do you develop that kind of presence? Let me give you 3 powerful habits that transform how others perceive you, without you ever having to say a word. 1. Control your movements. No fidgeting, no pacing. Walk slowly. Sit upright. Let every movement be deliberate, like you've already arrived, and you're in no rush to prove it. And number 2, master eye contact. Not aggressive, not evasive, just steady, calm, and clear. Look people in the eye like you're not judging them, and you don't need their approval either. 3, be the quietest in the room until it's time to speak. And when that moment comes, speak with clarity, not force. Make your words feel earned, not expected. That contrast, the silence followed by substance, is magnetic. Here's something I've learned over the years. Loudness is often a mask for insecurity. Stillness, on the other hand, signals someone who's already made peace with who they are. That's why Stoic presence works. It's not about dominance. It's about emotional sovereignty. You're not seeking, chasing, or reacting. You're rooted. And that, my friend, is rare. So the next time you walk into a room, don't try to be impressive. Be present. Let others talk over each other. Let them perform. You breathe. You observe. You stay grounded. And when it's your time to speak, they'll already be listening. Part 5. Silence creates mystery and magnetism. In a world where everyone is shouting to be heard, the person who holds their silence becomes magnetic. Think about it. We live in an era of oversharing. Every thought tweeted, every feeling posted, every opinion broadcast. But those who speak less, they stand out more. Why? Because mystery creates power. There's a Stoic principle that most people overlook. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You always own the option of having no opinion." Read that again. You don't have to speak. You don't have to react. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone who demands an answer. That freedom is rare. And in a society addicted to attention, restraint becomes a superpower. Let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who didn't say much, but when they did, everyone listened? It wasn't because of their volume, it was their stillness, their emotional discipline. The sense that you never really knew what they were thinking, and that made you want to know more. That's not accidental, that's intentional. People who protect their thoughts, who don't hand over every detail of their inner world, become unpredictable. And unpredictability draws curiosity. Curiosity draws respect. On the other hand, when you overshare, when you constantly vent, explain, justify, or post every feeling in real time, you give people a map to your mind. And guess what? If people can predict you, they can control you. That's why emotional restraint is not repression. It's strategy. It's power with patience. Stoicism teaches us this simple truth. Not everything needs a reaction. Not everything deserves a comment. Not everyone is owed your truth. There is a quiet kind of strength in simply saying, nothing. Not because you're weak, but because you've already made peace inside. Let me share something personal. There was a time in my life when I thought I needed to be understood. I'd over-explain, over-talk, hoping people would see my good intentions. All it did was drain my energy and feed theirs. Then I made a shift. I started guarding my words, answering questions with calm pauses, not rushing to explain when misunderstood. And slowly, I became lighter, and ironically, more respected. Here's a practice that changed everything for me. Pause before revealing. Before you share something personal, ask yourself, is this for connection or validation? Am I being honest or just impulsive? Will this empower me or expose me unnecessarily? 9 times out of 10, silence serves you better. Mystery isn't about manipulation, it's about self-respect. It's choosing not to let the world dissect every corner of your soul. It's keeping parts of yourself sacred, unseen, and strong. It's the difference between being a lighthouse and being a flashing neon sign. So if you want to become more magnetic, don't reveal everything. Don't react to every insult. Don't explain every choice. Let people wonder. Let them lean in. Let your energy speak before your mouth does. And when you do speak, say less, but mean more. Remember, silence is not emptiness. It's concentration. It's focus. It's the sound of someone who has mastered themselves and no longer needs the world to validate who they are. Because at the end of the day, you don't gain power by being loud. You gain power by being undisturbed. Part 6. Self-control is the source of influence. In a world addicted to reaction, restraint is rare. Have you noticed how quickly people flare up these days? A small comment, a minor disagreement, and suddenly someone's yelling, someone's offended, someone's spinning stories in their head. But the Stoic, he doesn't flinch. He doesn't chase attention. He doesn't fight imaginary enemies in his mind. Because a Stoic understands this powerful truth. Self-control isn't weakness, it's influence. Let's say someone throws a passive-aggressive jab your way. You know it was meant to provoke. You can feel the tension in the air. And yet, you say nothing. You don't retaliate. You don't even flinch. You simply breathe, observe, and stay composed. That moment, it's not silence. It's power. Because when you don't feed a fire, it dies. Here's the reality. People who want to control you will always try to trigger you. Why? Because emotional reactivity is predictable, and predictable people are easy to manipulate. But when you stay centered, when you don't give them what they expect, you rob them of control. That's what Stoic power looks like. It's quiet, grounded, unshakable. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That line cuts deep. How often do we play out arguments in our head that never happen? How often do we lose sleep over things we think someone meant? How often do we overreact to shadows and miss the light right in front of us? A Stoic doesn't live in those illusions. He stays in the present. He faces reality as it is, not as his fear or ego would like to twist it. I want you to think of someone you deeply respect. Not because they were loud or reactive or easily provoked, but because they were centered. They walked into a room with calm energy. They didn't need to prove anything. They made people feel safe or challenged without ever raising their voice. That kind of influence doesn't come from force, it comes from internal mastery. I remember a moment years ago, sitting in a tense meeting where someone tried to bait me publicly, question my competence in front of everyone. Old me would have snapped back. New me stayed still. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. I responded later, calmly, directly, and with zero emotional leak. And the shift in the room was instant. Because in that moment, I didn't just respond. I demonstrated who was actually in control. Not just of the room, but of myself. That's the edge most people don't train for. Everyone's learning how to argue, how to post, how to dominate online. But few are learning the real game, how to govern their emotions. And that's the Stoic edge. The calm man unnerves the chaotic one. He starves manipulators of their power by giving them nothing to work with. He doesn't fight battles that don't matter. He doesn't chase after noise. Because he knows that stillness influences more than sound ever could. So the next time someone tries to poke at you, to test your boundaries, to stir a reaction, pause. Ask yourself, is this fight necessary? Or is this just my ego feeling threatened? Will this matter tomorrow? Or am I being lured into an emotional trap today? And then choose power over performance. Remember, influence doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from controlling yourself. The strongest man in the room isn't the loudest. He's the one you can't shake. Part 7. Create impact that lingers in silence. In a world where everyone wants to be seen, the person who knows when to disappear becomes unforgettable. There's a different kind of power, not the one that dominates through volume or demands attention, but the kind that leaves a room and still lingers. That's the essence of silent impact. That's Stoic mastery. So how do you create that kind of presence? The kind that leaves people thinking about what you didn't say long after you've left? Here are 3 powerful Stoic techniques to create impact without saying a word. Technique 1. Leave unfinished energy. Not every sentence needs to end with a period. Not every emotion needs to be explained. Not every thought needs to be shared. We've been conditioned to over-explain, to make people comfortable, to tie everything in a neat bow. But here's the truth. Mystery creates mental engagement. When you leave space, people fill in the blanks. They reflect. They revisit your presence long after you're gone. Think about it. The most powerful conversations often leave us with a feeling, not just facts. A question that echoes. A sentence that trails off, but hits hard. You don't need to give people everything. Sometimes, what you hold back is what gives your presence power. Technique 2. Let your state speak. You don't have to talk to make an impact. Your breath, your posture, your gaze. These things speak before you ever open your mouth. In Stoic philosophy, your inner state is your signal to the world. If you're calm, centered, unbothered, people feel it. If you're emotionally secure, you don't need to prove it. If you're confident in your values, you don't need loud opinions. Your state becomes your speech. I've seen people walk into a room and shift the entire energy without saying a word. Why? Because they've trained their nervous system to stay still. They don't rush. They don't fidget. They don't react. And in doing so, they become magnetic. Technique 3. Disappear strategically. Here's something most people never understand. Access reduces value. When you're always available, always explaining, always responding, you dilute your presence. But when you choose when to show up, when you leave the room with composure, when you say less and withdraw with intention, people notice. And more importantly, they remember. There's an ancient rule in Stoic leadership. Be seen less, so your presence means more. You don't have to ghost people or isolate yourself, but learn the art of strategic absence. Leave meetings while your value is still high. End conversations on your own terms. Don't chase closure. Be okay with letting silence speak. When you disappear from the noise, you make room for your voice to echo. Let me ask you, do you leave people feeling full or curious? Do you dominate a conversation or anchor it with intention? Are you trying to be remembered by what you say or by how you made them feel without saying much at all? Your power doesn't lie in your words. It lies in your restraint, your ability to let your energy speak, and your wisdom to know when to withdraw. So here's the Stoic truth. You don't need to talk more to be respected. You don't need to explain yourself to be understood. You don't need to be visible all the time to be valuable. If you want to leave a lasting impact, say less. Breathe deeper, walk away sooner, and watch what happens when your presence becomes a memory people can't quite shake, because it wasn't loud. It was real. In today's world, where everyone is shouting, performing, chasing validation, the person who remains still becomes the most magnetic force in the room. Not because they're the loudest, but because their silence says more than most people's speeches. This is the Stoic blueprint for commanding respect. And it starts with a single principle. Power isn't performed, it's felt. The most powerful men in history didn't yell for attention. They didn't beg to be heard. They walked into a space, and something shifted. Not because of what they said, but because of what they didn't say. Their energy was calm. Their movements were intentional. Their silence was purposeful, and that's what made them unforgettable. So what's the blueprint? How do you command respect, not by force, but by presence? Let's bring it all together. 1. Stillness is strength. When chaos surrounds you, your calmness becomes a beacon. The world is reactive, angry, loud, impulsive. The man who can pause, the man who can breathe instead of break, he becomes the anchor. 2. Mystery is magnetic. You don't need to reveal everything you think or feel. You don't need to prove your intelligence with endless opinions. Real power lies in holding back, in choosing silence, in letting people wonder instead of handing them certainty. 3. Controlled energy is leadership. Your posture, your pace, your facial expressions, these non-verbal signals speak volumes. A man who controls his body controls the room, and a man who doesn't fidget, flinch, or fold. He earns respect without saying a word. This is not about manipulation. This is not about playing cool to impress others. This is about self-mastery, the kind that Stoic philosophers train for daily, the kind that says, I don't need to control the world. I only need to control myself. And that's enough. Because when you master your silence, your posture, your emotions, the world takes notice without you having to demand it. There's a quote I want to leave you with. It sums up everything we've explored. The most powerful men in history weren't the loudest. They were the ones who changed the room without speaking. Think about that. No performance, no attention seeking. Just presence, still, grounded. Focused. You don't need to talk more. You need to talk less and mean more. You don't need to chase respect. You need to embody it through discipline, composure, and mystery. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you feel the urge to react, pause. The next time you want to prove yourself, observe instead. And the next time you enter a room, walk like your presence is already enough, because it is. Not because someone told you so, but because you've done the inner work to know it. This is the Stoic path. This is the blueprint. And this is how you command respect, without ever needing to ask for it. If this message resonated with something deeper in you, don't ignore it. Hit subscribe and join a community that values strength, stillness, and self-mastery over noise and performance. Drop a comment. What's one habit you'll start practicing to let your presence speak louder than words? And remember, you don't need to raise your voice when you've raised your standard.